Well, it feels like from Vancouver to Halifax, Canadians are feeling the pinch more than ever. But why are we so anxious about spending money? And what is the cause of this major job market freeze? Is it a simple case of economic uncertainty, or is there more at play like Justin Trudeau and our lovely finance minister Chrystia Freeland's policies constantly making things worse? It's time to talk about our financial anxiety, what's happening in Canada, so let's get into it.
The Bank of Canada has begun to shift its policy toward avoiding a recession as consumer spending is weak and the unemployment rate has grown a full percentage point in a year. What is your response to the central bank's growing concerns about Canada's economic performance?
As I said in my remarks, we as a government really recognize the pressures that Canadians are facing. We recognize the pressure that high inflation put on Canadians, on Canadian families, and we recognize the pressure that Canadians have been facing from high interest rates. And that's why a central element of our government's economic policy has been about putting policies in place that create the conditions that allow inflation to go down so that interest rates can come down.
Every single policy and condition outside of cutting mass immigration, which as we've talked about in other videos, is now people are willing to admit is directly causing inflation inside of Canada. It is artificially keeping our numbers high, so it looks like we're doing okay. And then that means the Bank of Canada had to wait to cut rates because the numbers kept getting higher and kept getting worse for Canadians. So they'll do everything outside of that
to lift that pressure off of Canadians and Canadian families. It's been good news for Canada and Canadians that inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for 6 months in a row. And Canada last week became the first economy in the G7 to lower interest rates for the second time, having been the first economy in the G7 to lower rates for the first time. I was out knocking on doors in my own right.
Okay, I will not understand why her and Trudeau and other liberals keep using this as a point of bragging. What you're saying is our economy is doing the worst. So we had to cut earlier than everyone else at the expense of the Canadian dollar because numbers are getting worse.
Riding yesterday, and one of the things I heard from people was that high interest rates have been really a pressure and a concern for them. I heard from people who have a house, who have a mortgage renewal coming up. They were very, very aware that interest rates had come down last week, and they told me that that was a relief for them.
So glad that Chrystia Freeland, our Minister of Finance, could tell us our economy is doing so poorly and Canadians are so stressed, but they're glad and happy to see the rate cuts. Yeah, the rate cuts are a good thing, sort of, because it does mean that mortgages go down, and that is better for the average consumer. But again, that means that the economy is doing worse, and I don't know if these rate cuts are going to come soon enough before we start seeing job losses, which brings us to the next video from Bloomberg, where we're talking about how the Canadian consumer pessimism is growing, as I mentioned in other videos. We are seeing staggering decreases in consumer spending. Canadians are just not confident, and then we just don't have as much money at the end of every month as we used to. Let's get into it.
Liz, we poll monthly and we ask Canadians, what's the number one issue facing the country? And by far, for the last couple of years, it's been housing prices, the housing affordability crisis. About half of Canadians mention that as the number one issue. Second, of course, is interest rates, which is declining. And then we've got things like climate change and healthcare. So it's on the minds of Canadians constantly. We're finding that about half of Canadian households are struggling to pay either their rent or their mortgage in any given month.
That's amazing. Yeah, housing it's just this millstone hanging around the country's neck, it seems.
These inflation expectations are a thing that the Bank of Canada takes into consideration because that isn't, ironically, if people think inflation is going to get worse, it makes inflation worse. You can actually create your own future because what happens is they say, if my washing machine is going to be 10% more expensive next year and I need a new washing machine, I'll buy it this year to try and get it 10% less, right? But then what happens is everybody starts buying washing machines. So then the washing machine company goes, hey, we got high demand for this. Let's increase it by 20%. And that makes inflation worse. So having this still be number two as a concern is not a good thing.
It really is. We can't get away from it. It's the first time in decades that I can remember being in the industry where you've had a singular issue taking the top of the agenda. And that's really has trickle down effects in all aspects of the economy. The pessimism that's there. I'll give you a couple of examples. We look at the number of Canadians who think that the economy is in poor or very poor shape. It's 63%. We haven't seen those numbers, going back to 2017 when it was only around 40%. Those are the highest numbers on the negative side that we've seen. And conversely, only 30% say that it's in good or very good shape. So there's a big gap to catch up on.
I think you touched on this, but you say nearly 50% of Canadians worry about the ability to pay costs monthly. Is that just housing costs or costs generally?
It is just their rent or mortgage payments, and there's not a massive difference between renters and mortgage payers. It's all about the same number. But what's interesting in this poll is that
speaking of Canadians not having enough money for necessities or for paying their mortgage or all of our costs, I don't know if you guys saw this article from the Toronto Sun. The average Canuck paying more in taxes than on necessities, report says. And they get into it in this article on how we're now paying more in taxes on average than we're able to pay on our necessities to keep things alive and keep our households going. But don't worry, we just got a new digital sales tax as well. That's going to get tacked on to, Google and Facebook. And surely these are not going to trickle down to us as consumers in some way because taxes are a good thing. Let's get back to it.
We did dig deeper and ask people, what are they doing about it? How are they making ends meet? And what struck us is that, yes, people are cutting back in their spending. About half of Canadians are cutting back in their everyday household spending. But where it gets interesting from there is when you look at where else people are cutting back, and the numbers get a little bit more granular. People are saving less than what they had been in the past. So 36% of Canadians with a mortgage or rent are saying that. We've got 26% who have withdrawn money from funds that they've saved over time. We've got 15%.
Have you liked the video yet? If you haven't liked the video, it's a free way to help support the channel grow and get in front of more people. That's how YouTube shows it to more people. If you like what we're talking about here, feel free to subscribe. Love to have you on board. Let's get back to it.
Saying they've increased their debt. Some have changed jobs. Some have driven less vehicles. So there's a myriad of ways that Canadians are trying to make ends meet, but it is a bit of an overwhelming gloom. One
of our guests told us at the top of the show, talking about the US economy, that things are a lot worse for many people than the official numbers would indicate, in particular in the area of joblessness. Do you think there is a lot of misery or economic trouble below the surface that we don't even hear about?
I think so. I mean, Canadians are fairly upfront with us. We've asked the question, are they worried about becoming unemployed? And about, again, a similar number, 49% say that they're worried about them or their significant other, major income earner, losing their job. And that number has dramatically increased over the last couple of years. So that's something we've tracked since about 2017.
That's interesting.
Yeah, which is why I keep saying joblessness is way scarier than interest rates, because the interest rates coming down might save a couple $100 or maybe make it a couple $100 worse, but losing your job and the economy doing poorly because we are limping along because of the fake mass immigration numbers and all of the taxes, and our productivity and GDP is plummeting because of, again, liberal policies. That's going to be more expensive than a couple interest rate changes.
Dramatic increase in people worrying about them or their partner losing their work.
Yes, and what a new one that's popped up as well is the number of people, 34%, who feel that they worry about their employer running into financial trouble. And that also has increased pretty dramatically in the last several years.
Well, is there any bright spots here?
Well, we thought, last wave we did this, which was in January, we saw a hint that things were starting to move up. But the gloom and doom actually carries on into the future this time around. It's only 14% who have optimism that things will get better in the future. So
shout out to the 14% who are optimistic. I personally think Canada is in for a little bit of turmoil. As you guys know, I'm a real estate agent in London, Ontario. So people have asked about house prices. I don't know if it's going to be some major spike. I don't have a crystal ball, but personally, I think it'd be more likely for a slow grind sideways or upwards before we see the major spike. But the next video I want to get into is specifically about what he just talked about there, how companies and employers are struggling. And what are they doing? They are lying to investors. They are lying to banks. They are lying to the consumer to make things look like they're going better than they are. And they're posting ghost jobs at the expense of employees and job seekers. Let's get into it.
There's a growing hurdle that job seekers may have to jump over: ghost job listings. That's when a company posts a position they have no intention to fill. And a new survey from US-based Resume Builder conducted in May found 4 in 10 companies posted such a listing in the past year. It's a move business experts say is troubling.
I don't want to be rude to that last guy, but they really have to talk to his makeup artist and figure out what's going on.
Frustration in the job hiring and job seeking process to begin with. So mixing in and adding in potentially fake postings is definitely not helping the matter.
Of the companies that listed such a job, about a quarter posted 1 to 3 fake listings, with another 19% posting 5. However, there were 11%.
Think about that. That's all companies posting fake listings. These jobs don't exist. Somebody sees them and says, oh man, that's a job that I want for me. I'm going to try and get onto that. They shift their focus to that. They hope they're going to get in. And it's a fake job that they were never going to get hired for in the first place. I'm sure that's a great economic sign. Why are they lying? We'll talk about it in a bit.
Surveyed who posted 50 during this same period. The survey also found among the reasons fake jobs are posted is to show the company is growing and to make employees believe new workers are coming to ease workload. Experts warn
ease workload, or you're potentially being replaced. It seems like, oh, things are going fine. We don't need you as an employee. We've got all these job postings. But then, yes, the other big thing is they're trying to show either investors or banks or whoever they're getting their lending from, whoever's helping them get by, that, oh, look, we're still growing. These are our open positions that we're hiring for.
Though that if that help never comes, morale may eventually plummet. When trying to determine if a posting is real or not, job hunters are encouraged to research employers, tap into personal networks in case you know someone working there, and be skeptical if you see similar jobs being posted often or are listed for months.
If it's too good to be true, follow your gut. It may not be an opportunity that actually exists for whatever reason.
The survey also notes, even though the postings are fake, people are still being interviewed for jobs that won't be filled. But people talk, and it's why experts say companies should be wary about using such a method, because when they hire for real, applicants might not bother applying.
I personally think if I applied for a job and it's a fake job posting and you actually brought me in for an interview, legally, I should be allowed to fist fight you. You can't bring me in for a fake job and have me interview at the expense of my own time, taking time off work, all of these other things, and then it's a fake job. I'm allowed to fight you. I'm sorry. That's how it is. And so seeing all of these trends with fake job postings, consumers are concerned, rates are being cut, but good news is we're the first ones to do it because our economy is doing the worst. We also have this quick update from CTV about how people are hitting their financial limits, and we're seeing that it's a good test with what's happening at both McDonald's and Starbucks. I've got personal beef with McDonald's, no pun intended, because of how expensive their prices are getting. You know, $3.69 for McDouble is psychotic. Starbucks is getting smoked in China. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's get into what's going on with these locally.
It looks like more coffee drinkers are skipping the Starbucks run. The coffee giant reporting a slowdown in sales. Here's CTV's Sarah Plowman.
When cravings call, customers line up.
No, I just love this drink. Every time I go to Starbucks, I have to pick up one of these.
I know it's quite
What a happy guy.
costly, but I stop at every Starbucks that I go. I travel a lot.
Prices push some away.
Make it at home. Lasts me longer. Cheaper in the long run.
Around the world,
Interesting, worth noting. We had two potentially boomers, potentially Gen X, whatever you want to say, who seemed to be okay in the buyer profile. And then you had what was obviously a young Canadian going, hey, I can't afford Starbucks. So if that's the consumer trend, you know, obviously there's a problem.
fewer people went to Starbucks and McDonald's last quarter, the second straight drop in sales for Starbucks, and the first dip in more than 3 years for McDonald's.
Something has gone wrong. They've either overshot their price or they aren't giving people the right benefits, and they've now got to rethink that.
Inflation has taken a bite out of people's budgets and now chains sales. Some face pressure from homemade drinks and meals or competitors.
Consumers are looking for value, but also something of innovative value. They want low prices, but they want something unique.
Looking to lure people back, chains invested in speeding up wait times and brought in value and pairings menus. Think a drink and bite for less. Analysts expect more of it.
You're going to see retailers and restaurants sort of Focus a lot of their advertising and marketing on price, on value, how you can eat for $5 or $7.
Competitors are coming out. So there's this new coffee chain in China, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on its name. I probably should have just Googled it, but it is smashing Starbucks in China. Starbucks could go out of business in China from that. And it's because the consumer just doesn't care there. Here, what's happening is people are just not willing to pay that price anymore, especially with McDonald's. Maybe I'm losing weight because of it, but I used to eat at McDonald's more. I never go hardly at all anymore because the prices are crazy. And it's like, I'll buy a pound of ground beef for $6. These companies are pricing themselves out of the market. They're not becoming affordable for the average Canadian, the average person, and their sales are falling. And obviously we're hurting through job loss and other things. So these companies, unless they get serious about the value, people are going to stop going there. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for making it this far in the video. I thought this was a fun one today. What did you guys think? Comment down below if you liked that we're kind of telling a bit of story, kind of doing some stuff with it, and have a great rest of your day.